Countries are sometimes divided, and that can happen due to various reasons. In this video, we will talk about divided countries during the Cold War, and the countries that I will mention are divided primarily due to the Cold War itself. One of the most famous examples of Cold War era divided countries is East and West Germany. West Germany is also known as the Federal Republic of Germany, a capitalist democratic country with a free market economy. On the other hand, East Germany is also known as the German Democratic Republic, a communist country with a command economy. The history behind these countries is simple. By 1945, the Third Reich wasn't doing so well. By May of the same year, it collapsed and fell under the control of the Allied powers. During this time, the Western forces of the US, UK, France, Canada, etc. had control of the west of the country, while the Soviet Union had control of the east. During the peace conference, the victors decided that Germany would be partitioned between the US, UK, France, and the USSR. The plan was to reunify, but ideological differences eroded that scenario, especially between the West and the Soviet Union. Instead, the American, British, and French sectors will be unified and become West Germany. It received aid from the US through the Marshall Plan, which immediately kick-started the economic boom. The Soviet sector is to become a separate country, East Germany, where it will be considered a Soviet satellite state with a communist government. Germany became the main point of contention between NATO, which now includes West Germany, and the Warsaw Pact, which now includes East Germany. And it got so bad that World War III almost erupted. East Germany erected a wall within Berlin. This is because Berlin lies entirely around East Germany, but West Berlin is under the control of West Germany. Eventually, the Eastern Bloc began to crumble, and most of the East Germans had decided that Stalinist communism was not for their people anymore. They tore down the Berlin Wall, and the East German government collapsed. By 1990, West and East Germany had been reunified under the West German government, and it has been ever since, even though the legacy of the East German system remains on, some metrics. A notable example in Asia that still exists today is Korea. Since the end of World War II, Korea has been divided between the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, also known as North Korea, and the Republic of Korea, also known as South Korea, a democratic and capitalist country. Previously, Korea was one country under a monarchy, but Japan eventually controlled it. Japan lost World War II, and Korea was divided between the Soviet forces and American troops in the south along the 30th parallel. The plan was to reunify, but obviously, the Cold War happened. Eventually, these occupied zones became separate countries of Soviet-backed North Korea and American-backed South Korea. Unlike in Germany, an all-out war broke out due to the North wanting to reunify Korea under their control. The Korean War happened, in which the North was able to push deeper into the South, but the South counterattacked and pushed deeper into the North. But China intervened and pushed deeper into the South again until the South counterattacked and reached the area near the parallel. It was essentially a stalemate, but it technically never ended as no peace treaty was signed. Only a ceasefire was agreed upon. Both North and South Korea were devastated, and these two countries remained poor for a while. However, the South was able to industrialize, becoming an Asian tiger with a very prosperous society and a strong economy linked to services and industrial development. On the other hand, the North only became more authoritarian and remained a backward nation. But unlike Germany, no reunification happened at the end of the Cold War, which was due to North Korea slowly diverting away from Soviet influence. Despite that, the prospects of unification still exist, and the North can still consider force if they want to. Like Korea, Vietnam was also divided into North and South along the 17th parallel. North Vietnam, also known as the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, is a communist state. On the other hand, South Vietnam, also known as the Republic of Vietnam, is a non-communist state. Before division, Vietnam was a French colony, part of French Indochina. Vietnam was returned to France from Japan after World War II. However, the Vietnamese people could not accept French rule again and fought to gain independence. The powerful force within the Vietnamese resistance was the Viet Minh, a communist group that eventually came to win and defeat the French. As a result, Vietnam was partitioned and the Viet Minh came to rule the North. The South came under the rule of the West-backed non-communist government, but the South eventually fell under a series of coup and instability. The Viet Cong, a communist revolutionary organization, operated in South Vietnam, and it aimed to unify the South with the North under communist control. And we all know how it went. Vietnam War. As soon as Vietnam became partitioned, violence erupted between the Viet Cong with their North Vietnamese backers and South Vietnam. It was unacceptable for the Americans because of the domino theory, and they intervened on behalf of the South. Long story short, it was incredibly devastating. The guerrilla force by the communists was too fierce for the Americans, and after they withdrew by the 1970s, the North had captured Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam, in which the South Vietnamese government and the state promptly collapsed. Unlike in Korea, Vietnam was reunified under communist rule. There are other countries divided along ideological lines due to the environment of the Cold War. Here are some of these countries. One of these is Yemen. Yemen was divided between North Yemen, formerly known as the Yemen Arab Republic, and South Yemen, formerly known as the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen, during the Cold War. North Yemen was formed from the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, becoming an independent absolute monarchy, later engulfed in a civil war in the 1960s, becoming the Yemen Arab Republic, an Arab Republic. On the other hand, South Yemen was previously a British protectorate known as Aden Protectorate. Eventually, British rule ended after local revolts, becoming the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen, supported by the USSR. It was the only communist state to exist in the Arab world. The difference between this division from the previous examples is that Yemen had been divided under different governments and overlords for a long time, and it wasn't a result of the US and the USSR drawing a line. There were wars between the Yemen Arab Republic and South Yemen, and even internal wars, like the South Yemen Civil War in 1986. Eventually, with the collapse of communism, North Yemen and South Yemen agreed to reunify in 1990 to form the Republic of Yemen. But given the history of Yemen, it is evident that there won't be any instability soon, and that's false, unfortunately. Moving on to East Asia, let's talk about China. Now, China's quite complicated. The thing is that instead of a fractional divide of China, it's more of two ideologically different entities claiming to be China as a whole. The one we all know as China is the People's Republic of China, a one-party state ruled by the Chinese Communist Party, or the CCP. The other entity claiming to be China is the Republic of China, composed of Taiwan and some islands near mainland China. The difference is that the ROC is a democratic country. One thing is that the PRC is the one recognized by the majority of countries as China, and only a few countries formally recognize the ROC. The PRC also holds China in the UN. However, many countries, including the United States, have unofficial ties with the ROC, and some even back them. The history behind this is very complicated, but it all stems down to the Chinese Civil War between the communists and the nationalists. Eventually, the communists prevailed over mainland China and Hainan, and the nationalists retreated to Taiwan, which the communists had not captured. The Civil War has technically never ended, since both the ROC and the PRC still claim each other as the sole China. Various negotiations and proposals were made, but one China has not materialized so far. Moving on to Austria. Now, this example is not a formal division unlike the previous examples, but we'll talk about it nonetheless. After World War II, like Germany, Austria was divided into zones and occupied by the four Allied powers: the Americans, British, French, and Soviets. However, Austria was never fully divided like West and East Germany for several reasons. Even though the Anschluss of Austria by Germany had sketchy undertones, the Allies considered Austria a victim of aggression by the Third Reich. As a result, Austria was seen as liberated and not defeated. Also, the Soviets weren't that interested in having a slice of Austria as opposed to Germany. Although Austrian communists wanted division, Austria was re-established as a democratic nation, which is probably not an ideal outcome for Austrian communists. Eventually, the Austrian government's actions and the leadership change in Moscow guaranteed Austrian independence in 1955. The Soviets offered to leave in exchange for Austria becoming a neutral country that would never ever join Germany. Back to East Asia, now to Japan. Although Japan was never divided after World War II, there were plans to divide Japan between the United States, Britain, the Republic of China, and the Soviet Union. The Soviets would have likely controlled the North and established a puppet state there. The South would have probably kept the emperor, like in our timeline, which is dominated and allied to the United States. However, it never materialized as Japan came under the full occupation of the United States, except for the Kuril Islands, which Russia administers today. But Japan still claims it as theirs. Now to Italy and Yugoslavia, specifically Trieste. Trieste is not a country, or not fully a sovereign country, but it's still an interesting entity that we'll discuss here. Italy was never divided during the Cold War, but the Free Territory of Trieste, a small chunk of the territory now part of Italy, Slovenia, and Croatia, was created after World War II to cool down Italo-Yugoslav tension over the area. Eventually, the Allies partitioned it between Zone A and Zone B. Zone A came under Italian jurisdiction, which ultimately was integrated into Italy. In contrast, Zone B came under Yugoslav jurisdiction, eventually incorporated into Yugoslavia, and became part of Slovenia and Croatia today. Other country divisions are slightly less related to the ideological divide that is the Cold War, such as India. India was previously under the control of the British as the British Raj, but the Indians didn't want British rule anymore. It was a majority Hindu area, but there were Muslims too, and they wished to have their own state. The British couldn't force India to stay united, so they partitioned it between India and Pakistan, and they lived happily ever after. Just kidding, there were lots of violence and wars, unfortunately. On the other side of the world, the island of Ireland is divided between Northern Ireland, part of the United Kingdom, and the Republic of Ireland, an independent country. It was divided mainly due to the Irish Catholic and Ulster Protestant division on the island, in which the latter decided to stay loyal to Britain. It wasn't divided during the Cold War, but it remained divided throughout the period. During the Cold War, violence erupted in Northern Ireland. It became the Troubles, a sectarian conflict. Communism had close to nothing to do here, but it was incredibly devastating. And it was only during the Good Friday Agreement in 1998 when most of the violence ended. Ireland is still divided today, but there are talks of unification. Now to this tiny island in the Mediterranean Sea, Cyprus. Cyprus was previously an Ottoman territory, eventually a British colony, and now an independent state since 1960. However, Cyprus is such a mess that it is divided between four entities: the internationally recognized Republic of Cyprus, the unrecognized Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, the British bases of Akrotiri and Dhekelia, and the UN demilitarized zone along the country. During negotiations that led to independence, Cyprus agreed to keep the British bases. But as you may know, many Cypriots are Greek, and they wanted to unify with Greece through a movement known as Enosis. Inter-ethnic violence erupted between the Greek Cypriots and the Turkish Cypriots, the minority scattered across the country. When the Greek-backed coup led to the government increasingly pursuing Enosis, Turkey invaded and established Northern Cyprus. The UN then set up a demilitarized zone between the Northern Cyprus and the Republic of Cyprus. That's how Cyprus has such an administrative mess of boundaries, and it still is divided today. Moving on to Libya. Libya wasn't formally divided, but France and Britain occupied it after seizing it from Italy after World War II. The British eventually backed the formation of the Emirate of Cyrenaica within their occupation zone. Still, by 1951, it was reunified with the French occupation zone and Tripolitania, also occupied by Britain, to form the Kingdom of Libya under Idris I. To summarize, some countries were divided during the Cold War. Some can be directly tied to the Cold War itself, while some are less related. Some ended up getting reunited, and some remain divided up to this day. The Cold War is a period of division, spheres of influence, and fear, and it carries a lasting legacy to the current geopolitics even if the US won the Cold War. If you have countries that I forgot to include in this video, you can mention them in the comments. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe for more country neighbors.